Today, we're going to dive into that critical 20-year stretch between two of the biggest wars in all of human history. We're going to see how a world that was absolutely desperate for peace somehow found itself right back on the brink of total war.
I mean, this is the central question, isn't it? World War I was supposed to be it, the war to end all wars. So how on earth did that hope just crumble, leading to something even deadlier? Well, let's connect the dots. So our story really kicks off right after World War I. And even though the fighting had finally stopped, the world was, well, it was anything but peaceful. It was this strange time of deep contradictions and really fragile hopes. And this, right here, this really gets to the heart of the problem. On one hand, you had this massive, overwhelming desire for peace. I mean, millions had died. But on the other hand, you had the grim reality of completely shattered economies and a peace treaty that was, honestly, deeply flawed. The Treaty of Versailles was this messy compromise. You had France wanting to punish Germany, you had America pushing for this more idealistic peace, and the result was something that pretty much nobody was happy with. Yeah, for Germany, this treaty wasn't about healing at all. It was about punishment. The country was forced to take all the blame for the war, tear down its military, give up a ton of territory, and pay these just crippling amounts of money. What this did was create this deep, lasting feeling of national humiliation that just festered for years. And it became a super powerful rallying cry for extremists down the road. And all that simmering anger, it was about to have gasoline poured all over it. The next major event wasn't a battle. It was a global economic collapse that would push millions of people right to the edge. The year is 1929. The stock market in the United States crashes, and like a domino effect, this financial crisis just spreads like wildfire across the entire globe. We know it today as the Great Depression, and it would absolutely define the next decade. You have to remember, this collapse had a devastating human cost. This wasn't just about numbers on a stock ticker. This was about families with no food, people losing their homes, and this just profound sense of hopelessness. Fear was pretty much the main emotion of the 1930s. And this brings up a really critical question. When people are that scared and that desperate, what are they looking for? Well, a lot of the time, they start searching for a strong leader who promises simple fixes, a return to order, and this is key, someone to blame for all their problems. So this climate of fear and economic chaos, it created the perfect breeding ground for a new and really dangerous type of leader to come in and take power. So you see guys like Hitler in Germany and Mussolini in Italy rise up with this simple but incredibly powerful promise: jobs, pride, and power. Now, if you're part of a population that feels humiliated and totally broke, that message is going to sound pretty good. Over in Japan, military leaders were pushing a similar vision of national glory, but they were also driven by a desperate need for resources like oil and rubber for their empire. But in all three places, the deal was the same. Give us total control and we'll give you a glorious future. And this new political system, it had a name: fascism. The core idea is both simple and frankly terrifying. One leader has all the power, period. There are no real elections, there's no free speech, and there's absolutely no room to disagree. Everything is controlled through intense nationalism, nonstop propaganda, and most of all, fear. So, what happens when nations that are built on promises of power and military strength decide they want more? Well, they start to take it by force. And the aggression just kept escalating. It started with Japan invading a part of China. The world didn't really do much. Then Italy invaded Ethiopia. Again, no real consequences. So Hitler, feeling bolder, starts to openly defy the Treaty of Versailles, rebuilding Germany's army and just annexing neighboring territories. Every single move was a test to see how far he could push. And this is the part where everyone asks, why didn't other countries stop them, right? With every invasion, every broken treaty, why didn't major powers like Britain and France just kind of stand by and let it happen? The answer comes down to one single, very controversial policy: appeasement. To get it, you have to remember how traumatized everyone was from World War I. Nobody wanted a repeat of that horror. So the hope was, if they just gave the dictators some of what they wanted, eventually they'd be satisfied and stop. Some people even felt a little guilty, thinking maybe the Versailles Treaty was too harsh and Hitler's early demands weren't totally out of line. And this just lays out the massive gamble of appeasement perfectly. The hope was simple: avoid war, whatever the cost. But the huge risk was that giving in to a bully doesn't make them happy, it just makes them bolder.
each time aggression went unanswered, the dictators demanded more, pushing the world closer and closer to the very war appeasement was supposed to prevent.
So, we've traced this path from a really flawed peace all the way to the doorstep of a new war. But why is it so important to understand all this today? Well, the lessons are pretty clear, and they're pretty stark. The biggest war in history didn't just happen overnight. It was built on the foundation of an unfair peace treaty that created years of resentment. It was fueled by economic desperation that made extreme, dangerous ideas seem appealing. And ultimately, it was allowed to happen by a world that chose to ignore aggression, just hoping it would go away.
And that really leaves us with a final thought. This isn't just some story about the past. It's a series of really powerful warnings about just how fragile peace can be. So, I'll leave you with this question to think about. What is the single most important lesson from this period that we absolutely have to remember to protect our world today? Thanks for watching.